Hi everyone, it's Aga from EurekaCrystalBeads.com and I'm here with another fun beading tutorial for you. Before I get started, just a quick reminder to check out the rest of our channel, and if you like what you see, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you always know when we're posting new content. In today's video, we're going to be making this jellyfish earring. That's why I call this celestial jellyfish. And I made it using beads from our latest Crystal Waters collection. So our collections are not a subscription, they are just limited things we do every now and then, typically every month that we release, and you can get them. But don't worry if you didn't manage to get one, or if you're watching it far away in the future, because to make these earrings, you can just use any other beads of the same kind as these. So to make this earring, you're going to need crescent beads, you're going to need bugle beads, and Miyuki or Toho 3mm bugles will do fine, 11/0s, and here I have Toho, but Miyuki will do fine as well. And the Likas or Toho Treasures, these are Toho Treasures. And when it comes to other types of glass beads, to add some weight to the tentacles of our jellyfish, I'm going to be using 6mm Firepolish beads. And just as a special touch, because they were in the collection, I'm going to be using Chinese rondelles over here. Now, because it is an earring, you're going to need some earring findings, and this one was in the collection, as well as the jump ring that I just put through the 11/0 because they are thin enough to go through an 11/0. But if you want, you can also use the demi rounds that were also in the collection. I didn't include them because that will be just like one bead on top over here to make it easier to attach it to the earring finding. But as you can see, you can also do it without the demi round. So this is what you're going to need. When it comes to tools, you're of course going to need a needle, and a size 12 or 11 will do best. And for this one, we're not going to be using the typical beading threads such as Fireline or Wildfire, because they are kind of too stiff, and we really want this kind of flowy and supple effect so that the jellyfish kind of dangles joyfully next to our face. And just some scissors to cut off the excess thread. Okay, let's start. Okay, so I already put a lot of thread on my needle because I just don't want to add on more thread. I like working with one piece of thread. You can, of course, just not cut off the excess, which I'm going to do. I'm not going to cut off the excess thread right away as I start. I'm going to keep it because it's going to be easier for me to hold on to that tail thread as I go. And if I run out of thread, I can always go back to that tail thread and start from the other side. And in here, we're going to be making a lot of tentacles. I mean, a lot, 6 of them. So we're going to need all the thread to make them. And as I said, we want the tentacles supple and flexible and flowy. So I'm going to be using 1G. Nymo is also great for that purpose. This is going to make our tentacles really kind of hang down and dangle properly. Okay, we're going to start with Toho Treasure beads and the crescents. So I'm actually going to start with a stopper bead here. So I am sliding it down all the way down my thread, and I'm just going to go through it twice so that it stays in place and I can remove it later on. I just make sure that it slides. Okay, we can start. So I'm picking up one crescent bead and I'm going into this right hole. Now a Toho Treasure, another crescent bead, and I'm going into the same right side hole, holding them like this so that This is what they're positioned like. Another Toho Treasure. Another Crescent. Another Toho Treasure. Okay, so I have 5 Crescents and 4 Toho Treasures on my needle. And first up, I'm going to make the shape of our jellyfish hood. And since I don't like the thread showing like outside of my work and I would have to go back in here, I just pick up one 11-0 and go back the other hole here with it, because it's not going to be a problem for us, that 11-0, but it will just kind of improve it visually because the crescents are pink or violet and the thread is, as you can see, teal, because I didn't want it to kind of show if it was pink inside these teal Firepolish because they're transparent, so I used teal thread. Okay, now I'm going to be going back through all of these crescent beads, adding Toho Treasure in between each of them. Alright, now I have my hood, sort of. It's going to get a little bit more loose, so it's going to get a little bit more rounded. But now I can start making my tentacles. So what I do is now I'm going to make my tentacles out of the Bugles and the 11-0s, and I'm going to finish with the Chinese rondelle, 6mm Firepolish, and 3 Toho Treasures to block that off, just like you can see in here. So I am picking up 11-0 and a bugle, and I'm going to do this 15 times. Alright, so that's 15. What I'm gonna do now is I'm going to skip the 3 Toho Treasures and I'm going to go in the Firepolish and up all of the other beads. Now, because we're using Toho 1G, which is multi-strand thread, it's not braided like Fireline or Wildfire, so you have to be careful not to go through the thread with your needle because you may actually create a sort of a blockage and you might not be able to pull it through. It's not something you will normally do, but it does happen. So if you don't seem to be able to pull your thread through, just take it a little bit back, take it off out of your beads, because you might have hit your thread with your needle and just kind of gone through it. Okay, I went through all of my beads. I make sure they're tight. You can always lay them down, kind of pull on the end of your tentacle, and then again from the top to make sure it's tight. Now I'm going to go back in my hood through the treasures and the crescents until I've reached that middle crescent, the third one. And this is where I'll make the first half of the kind of hanger that is going to hang on, which I'm just doing by adding a bugle, an 11-0, and a bugle. And I'm going around the crescent, the very same hole, and in the same direction. And I'm going to go through like this twice. So I go through that bugle, the 11-0, and the second bugle for the second time. And then I just go forward through the rest of the crescent so that I'm on the other side and can create the second tentacle. So I do the same in here, 15 of these 11 bugle sequences, then this end sequence, and back up. Now I'm done with this tentacle. And as I said, I don't like my thread showing very much, so to make the tentacle next to it, I would have to kind of go around here, but this is where I can just go all the way through the crescents here and add the 11 between the holes of this crescent on the other side. This is also going to strengthen our structure a little bit. So I'm just picking up an 11 and going back up the other hole here. And as I go, I might as well finish that hanger. So I'm adding a bugle, and this 11 here on top is going to connect the two of them. So I just go through it, add another bugle, go through that crescent bead, and I'll just go through all three of them again. And on to make the next tentacle. Just make sure you're also going through these Toho Treasure beads that are in between the crescents so that you don't miss any of them. Alright, let me just make this tentacle. Okay, now I'm done with this tentacle and I'm going to go straight through to make the last of these outer ones. So I'm just going to the other side. And now, since I'm not exactly sure that this thread is going to be enough to make this tentacle and one more, I'm not going to cut off this tail thread yet. I'm just going to move that stopper bead a little bit down, and I'll hold it to the side and I'll finish it later, because just on the off chance that I'm going to need that tail thread to make that last tentacle in the middle here, I'm going to leave it. Okay, now this tentacle. Okay, now I finished this tentacle here and I am willing to take the risk, and I think that I do have enough thread for that last tentacle in the middle. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to go up several of the segments so that I'm through this crescent, treasure, crescent, and treasure, and this treasure here is what I want to be coming out of. Now I'm going to go down with my thread, and this is where I'm going to put my middle tentacle. And what we're going to connect here, I'm going to go down this tentacle and then back up like with every other one. But I want this to be in the center, so I'm going to connect this treasure here, this one, with this one on the opposite side. So when I'm going back up my tentacle, I'm going to come into this bead and go through this one and then make a knot and weave in my thread. So this one is going to be slightly different. because I'm going to put a Firepolish here in the center so that the crescents lie on top of it and sort of this shape is kept. Whatever you do, no matter if it gets a little bit more loose over time, this bead is going to keep the shape of this hood of our jellyfish. So this is what I'm going to start with. Nothing else, as you can see, just that Firepolish. And then I'm going to start with the regular pattern, and I'm going to add 16 of them because I want this middle tentacle to be a little bit longer than the rest. Just like this. Okay, so I'm starting with a Firepolish. That's why there's 5 tentacles, but you're going to need 6 Firepolish beads. And then 16 of these bugle sequences. Now all the way up. All the way through my last tentacle, and as I said, this is the bead that I was coming out of. So on the other side of the crescent, the middle one, this is where I'm going to pass through. Make sure that your thread doesn't hook onto anything. There. I'm just going to additionally pull on it from the bottom to make sure that it's nice and tight. But I'm also going to massage it so that it's nice and dangly. And this is basically where you can already make a knot, which is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to hide the tail thread and the beads down one of the tentacles, the nearest one. So I'm just making a loop, going through that loop, creating another loop, going through it, and pulling it down so that it's a nice, tight knot. And I'm going to hide the tail in some of these beads here. I'll cut off enough of thread from the spool to be able to hide this thread as well. And I'll take off my stopper bead and do the same thing on the other side. Only in here I'm coming out of the crescent, so why don't I make a knot on the thread that is in here? Okay, now the jellyfish is almost done. As you can see, the middle one is a little bit longer than the rest. The shape is going to look quite nice if we kind of just hold it over here. So all that's left for me to do is to attach this to the earring finding. Now these jump rings are so thin that you could open them with just your nails, but I just got mine done. I stuck them on, so I don't want to ruin them. So I just open it with my flat nose pliers and chain nose pliers. And there's 2 ways you can attach it, especially if you have a thicker jump ring. You can just put it under all of those beads, like so that it goes under that 11 here. And I want to do it in this way because this is how it's going to hang, and I want it to hang like facing with that arch that the crescents make for the jellyfish. I want it to face the front, so I need the jump ring to go this way. You could, of course, attach it like this. You could just attach it to the earring finding like this, and the result will be basically the same. But I really wanted to kind of dangle as much as possible, so that's why I'm including a jump ring as well. And I'm going to put it through this 11 out here, as you can see, pretty easy. Then the earring finding, and because the earring is kind of two-sided, it doesn't have a front, doesn't have a back. So whichever way, close up the jump ring and just make sure that it's all the way closed. And the earrings are now done. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. All of the materials can be found, except for the tools, in our latest collection, the Crystal Waters collection, and all of these beads separately and individually you can buy at eurekacrystalbeads.com. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye!